Now, here's your host for AHA Business Radio, Alan Hirsch.
Good evening out there. Welcome to the show. My guest tonight is Andy Fleischer of Strategic CFO Services. We will be discussing about cash management for businesses and why it's important in all various aspects of it. But before we begin the conversation, I'll remind everybody that after the first break, I will have the AHA Business News Update. And later in the show, I will have the AHA Business Trivia Contest. The caller with the answer to tonight's trivia contest will receive a gift certificate to the Capitol Grill. Andy, welcome to the show. As I said, we're going to be talking about cash management. But before I get into that conversation, I usually ask my guests a question, and that is, what motivates you to get up in the morning and go to work?
Well, I love improving businesses, Alan. I mean, I really have a passion for it. And I find it's so many of these businesses I work with, we're able to really use my experience and having worked with over 300 companies in my career to really help these businesses go forward, do business better, cheaper, and faster, and really improve the valuation of their businesses over time.
Oh, that's great. So how'd you get started as in the CFO business?
Well, I did a stint in public accounting for about 7 years, a couple firms, worked with a lot of great companies and some not so great companies. Really learned a lot about what it takes to do good business and make a lot of money in business. Additionally, worked in a couple of great big companies and a couple of small companies on the corporate side. The small companies in the internet field went through a little thing called the dot-com boom and dot-com crash, and was able to really learn a lot and help these companies grow and ultimately sell off a couple of companies for a very nice sum of money for the owners.
I hope you shared in some of those.
A little bit. They were very generous.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
But my passion today is working with companies, and my team of CFOs share the same passion. And our goal is to always help the business owners get a better handle of their business, to get better understanding of their business through the numbers and through the strategy, make sure that they're doing business better and making more money and building the enterprise value of their companies.
So my really first question is, and I probably know the answer, but I want to hear it from you, why is cash king?
Why cash is king? You hear that all the time, but from my experience, nothing has caused more business failures that I've seen up close and personally in my career than lack of proper cash management and lack of cash flow. It will absolutely kill a business if the business owners do not have a handle on their cash flow. It's the lifeblood of every company, and you need that blood to flow. That cash has to flow, and you have to have a plan for your business to be successful and to be a going concern.
So what are some of the kinds of plans you like putting in place for your clients to help them manage their cash?
I don't think the plans have to be very complicated, but they need to be simple. They need to accomplish the goal of giving you that windshield. And typically, some of the plans that I put in are Excel-based. We typically have a rolling 13-week cash flow. For most businesses, this works very well. And, we're really talking about really measuring the true inflows or receipts of a business and true outflows, which, it's not your typical profit and loss statement. Me being an accountant by trade, I think it's important to point out that that's one of the common misconceptions. A business owner will say, well, I'm making money. My income statement says I'm making money. But if you're not collecting those receivables and you have other payments that are for future periods that are due now that don't get recognized for accounting into the future, you're not making money, and you're certainly, your cash flow is being harmed very adversely.
Well, as I like to tell people, I've seen and I think we talked about it when we first met, that I've seen a number of businesses that have very profitable balance sheets and profit and loss statements, but go out of business because of all their profits and income happen to be in receivables and inventory, and therefore can't pay next week's payroll. So to me, cash management has always been a very important part of how I manage the business. As I said to you earlier, I always required, and my business was a little different than a service business that takes money in, a lot of money on a regular basis. I always had that kind of cash forecast that I required every time I got reports from my CFO or my controller to make sure I knew where we would be. It kept me informed. So, and we'll talk about it, but some of the things you can do when you have shortages. So you also talk about some of the more recent developments that have made some changes, particularly, I guess, in the last 6 or 7 years in CFO management and products and the structure within industry and banking. So can you tell me a little bit about that before we get into some other details?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things we've seen, that I like to say is that all the rules have changed since the financial crisis of 2009, 2010. And one of the big things that I've seen throughout a number of industries, throughout my entire client base, is a delaying of cash coming from larger businesses to smaller businesses. 10 years ago, almost everyone paid in 30 days. That was the norm. But since the financial crisis, we've seen a lot of these larger companies, quite frankly, hoarding cash and paying their bills in 60 or 90 days intentionally and forcing those terms down onto the smaller businesses. A lot of the smaller businesses I work with, their suppliers are requiring them to pay their bills in 30 days or less, and yet they may not get paid for 60, 75, maybe even 90 days by the big companies. They have no choice but to take those terms because they need the business to survive. So managing that extra 30 or 60 days of cash flow is very challenging.
Particularly when you're a small business in between a big business you're selling to and a big business you're buying from.
Yes.
They both want their cash, and you as a little guy are the one that really is going to suffer the most in doing that. You also talked about some of the newer products that help cash management.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I like a lot of the cloud-based accounting systems. QuickBooks Online in particular, NetSuite's another one that's very good. I think the thing that's really neat about the cloud accounting systems that we've seen is by setting up your invoicing to email out a link to a website where your customer can come in, click on the invoice, and put their credit card information in, or a bank, preferably a bank information, because you can save on the credit card fee through electronic funds transfer. It's a way to get the money in much quicker, much more seamlessly using the technology, and it accelerates your cash flow. If you can get those invoices out and get that cash in faster than it would take in mailing a check, I mean, even a week makes a huge amount of difference when you're running a small business. If you can permanently pull forward all of your receipts a week, 2 weeks, I've seen up to a month pull forward by just getting the invoices out faster and getting payment in faster. I've seen an entire month pull forward. That's a permanent pull forward in cash flow, which can make or break a small business.
Oh, absolutely. So you're really talking about, and this is part of some of the changes in the banking products. We used to get a check. It'd take 3 or 4 days in the mail. You'd take it to the bank. They take 3 to 5 days, particularly if it was an out-of-town check, to clear it. But now what you're talking about through these online products, banking product, working with the banks in conjunction with the software packages, you basically have it's overnight.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, when you are receiving the checks in, having that check scanner tied in your bank account and scanning those checks daily, not having to drive to the bank, but scanning those checks daily. A lot of these banks, you can get that real-time availability of funds, same day, within 24 hours, certainly. Getting that money in that bank, clearing faster, all of that helps you. You get all full use of that float much quicker than if you wait to the end of the week and make that bank deposit. It's very important to get that money in faster.
So that's one of the tools I assume you're using with your clients to try to get the money in faster and use it faster from their bigger customers. Are there any other things that you're working with or you recommend for your clients to try to get that money coming in faster from their customers?
Yes, certainly. The use of discounts and traditional payment strategies to get money in faster. Oftentimes, giving a customer a 1 or 2% discount to get the money in 10 or 15 days is a very good strategy and actually pays for itself from a cost of money standpoint. And getting that money in faster, you have use of those funds much quicker, and that can really help accelerate the cash flow in a small business. But the main thing we like to do is utilize the technology. That's one of the big things that we like to do by having a better forecast and visibility of the inflows coming in and then timing the outflows going out, and having a strategy built around that is really critical.
So what are some of the strategies that you're using on those cash management programs or systems in order to work with? I mean, one of the things you talked about is a 13-week revolving cash flow statement, but some which should certainly help. But what are some of the other things?
Yeah, I think the basic premise is having that windshield or visibility and being able to see all of your inflows when you believe they're going to come in. You can basically time those in most businesses based on your payment cycle and your history, always breaking out the anomalies. You're a super large customer that, pays, a large chunk of your receipts for a month. It's very important to break that out separately and have timing to make sure that that's in. But also, traditional collection processes, having someone that is minding the store there, staying on top of your clients that are slow pays. Some of the best credit managers I've ever known, one in particular that sticks out because he was in the restaurant business, collecting from restaurants, and they're notoriously struggle to pay their bills. And he was one of the best I've ever met. He said that 1/3 of the people you can send them an invoice, ask them nicely, and they'll pay you. Another third you need to remind them a second time. The other third, you have to chase them, badger them, and do whatever you have to do to get them to pay. And this is a distributor that had very, very low write-offs and bad debts, dealing with a historically, trouble-paying industry. So,
well, it does. It's before I continue with the next question. Just want to remind everybody, I have Andy Fleischer of Strategic CFO Services in the studio with me. To join the conversation or ask any questions, please call 410-481-1300. And what I was getting to is you use this 1/3, and in a lot of things in business, and I've used it a lot. As salesmen, you have 1/3 that are great, 1/3 that aren't, and 1/3 that you're not sure whether you should change or not because you'll get 1/3 of the other. But it's true, the same thing with customers. But what I was going to say about collection is a business owner should have somebody collecting that money if it's not them.
absolutely.
Because if you don't have someone on it, it slides, it falls behind, and when you don't have the cash, you can't pay your bills. And I agree with you. You need to have a good person somewhere in the business that does the collection for you.
Absolutely. And typically you don't want that to be in the sales function. Typically it needs to be more on the administrative side because you want your sales function to be, friendly with your customers in most times. But as a last resort, the salespeople can get involved and certainly have done that in critical situations with certain clients.
Okay. One of the other things that I think's happened over the last 7 years with the financial crisis is the changes in the banking regulations and what's happening in the availability of money through banks. Can you, as a CFO who I know works with a lot of banks, with a lot of clients, with a lot of banks, a lot of things have changed. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I work with a number of great banks in the area, and I hear every day from these bankers when I meet with them that they're looking for good clients, but they just don't have the amount of information that they need, the right type of information that they need to make these clients bankable. And that's one of the strategies that we use a lot, is making sure that the financial reporting is up to date, is accurate, and truly reflects the business, and then working with the bank to get an arrangement in place, especially in these environments where maybe the customers have stretched them out, from 30 to 60 to 90 days. It's critically important that we have a line of credit product in place from a good, strong banking partner that's willing to, lend on receivables and inventory if that's the nature of the business, or, some other factor that fits that business nicely. And then it's very critically important that the business owner understands that they can borrow that money to make the sale, buy the products, and pay the payroll. But as soon as that money comes in, you got to pay that line of credit down. And when we use that effectively, it's a very, very strong tool to grow the business in short-term capital. The banks are very happy and are very willing to do more credit with the company.
Yeah, one of the things I've always talked to my clients about, and I think we talked about it before the show, is building that relationship with a bank. Relationship, in spite of the banks being huge, there's the banks before the crisis, everyone complained they were too big. They're bigger now than they were then. But being that as it may, you still need to build a relationship with your loan officers and your relationship managers, because you need to let them know both good and bad so that you can deal with them. They can be there when you need the money. And when you're doing well, they need to be a partner and be aware of it, because sometimes when you're doing better than you had been, you need more money than when you are not doing as well. So you need to be able to build that banking relationship. And I'm sure you as a CFO for hire work with a lot of your clients, helping them to build that relationship.
Absolutely. That's definitely one of the things we do a lot, is to make those introductions and, find the right banking partner for each type of business. Banks do vary in their appetite for different types of clients, different types of deals. So it's critically important that we find the right banking partner for each and every client that we service. At the same time, it's critically important that we get the right recipe for success from a facility standpoint, and that the business owner understands that there are certain things you have to do with a bank, and you need to regularly communicate with them. You need to be honest and upfront with them. When things get bad, I can't tell you how many times I've seen clients will actually run and hide and try to avoid the bank. That's the exact wrong thing to do. Sitting down with the banker is the right thing to do, and explaining where you're at.
Absolutely. I have one client who is a government contractor who was anticipating problems through the sequester and the closing of the government last year. And I made a suggestion: go to the bank, tell them what the issues are, that you're going to be fine, but you might have cash flow problems if the government shuts down, isn't going to pay you for a couple months.
Yes.
And he went to them knowing what the problems had been for 3 or 4 months, and ended up getting an enlarged line of credit, because he told them where he was going to be, and they worked with him to get through that crisis. And it panned out because he was active and communicable. You're absolutely right. People that bury their head in the sand like an ostrich will not be successful in dealing with banks. When they have a problem, the bank will, when you call the bank when it's too late, the bank will say, "Oh, thank you," and they'll turn it off to the workout department instead of working it out with you.
Yes.
They'll go into the collections. They'll give you 30 days to pay your loan, instead of being your partner in a general sense, working with you to help you grow your business. A good bank will do that if you communicate properly with them.